Let's talk front foot elevated split squats during pregnancy. Should you do them? Should you modify them? Or just plain avoid them? Well, like everything to do with training during pregnancy, the answer is nuanced and highly individual. In this video, I'll share my perspective as a pregnancy and postnatal specialist on training the front foot elevated split squat during pregnancy. Of course, I'll give you specific reasons why I have this perspective, along with some fantastic alternatives and modifications. So if you want to train in the safest possible way during your pregnancy by following training advice from a pregnancy and postnatal specialist strength coach with over a decade's experience working with the pregnant population, then this video is absolutely for you. And while the front foot elevated split squat may be less well known amongst split squat variations, its longer range of motion and unique positioning make it an essential exercise for the general population, but especially for people who are looking to progress to your traditional barbell back squat, for those who experience pain when back squatting, and it's an especially good exercise for people who have longer legs. Why? Well, from a purely strength and muscle building perspective, the front foot elevation allows deeper knee flexion, and this increases the tension on the quads and glutes and loads the muscle in that stretched position. And of course, greater range of motion leads to greater muscle stimulus, which leads to better results, regardless of whether you're looking for strength, speed, power, or hypertrophy. And from a purely mobility perspective, the greater range of motion of this exercise helps with hip, knee, and ankle mobility, which has fantastic carryover for those wanting to progress to barbell back squats. And of course, on the flip side of this, it makes it a fantastic alternative for those who experience joint pain when back squatting. And we also can't ignore the fact that it's a unilateral exercise, which makes it fantastic for improving strength and muscle imbalances from your left to right side, which then has a flow-on effect to decreasing your chances of injury or pain. It also helps with balance and stability, and I hate using this word, but when it comes to functionality, our body works in locomotion. So when we walk or run, we do this one leg at a time. So training unilateral movement patterns are extremely important. So again, as an exercise for your general population, front foot elevated split squats are a fantastic exercise and should be a staple part of any strength training program. But here's the thing, during pregnancy, as much as you're still so capable and strong, you have contributing factors that change your body's physiology and biomechanics, which can impact how you move. And the other thing to consider is that no two pregnancies are the same. So what one person can do no problems, or what feels good for that person, another may feel pain. And when it comes to the front foot elevated split squat during pregnancy, there are a few things that we need to consider. So you have the change in your center of gravity, which causes your pelvis to anteriorly tilt. You also have joint laxity in your lumbar spine and pelvis due to hormones and the changes to your abdominals. And this joint laxity causes increased mobility of your pelvis to help birth your baby. But this can significantly affect your sacroiliac joint at the back of your pelvis and pubic symphysis at the front. Then of course you have the weight of your baby adding extra pressure to your lumbopelvic region. So you have a lot going on, and again, this will be unique from woman to woman, even from pregnancy to pregnancy. And depending where you are in your pregnancy journey, at some stage you're going to have your growing bump to consider, which, given the range of motion of this exercise, it can get in the way or cause you to compensate by externally rotating your knee more and turning your chest inwards to create more space for your bump. However, from my perspective, this probably isn't a great workaround, as it can exacerbate the opening of the pelvis at your pubic symphysis at the front of your pelvis and create rotation at the sacroiliac joint at the back. So when it comes to training the front foot elevated split squat during pregnancy, because of the increased range of motion at the hip joint of this movement and the increased torque it places on the pelvis, I typically won't program this particular exercise during pregnancy. Now, of course, the first 12 to 16 weeks of pregnancy is somewhat of a grey area, as you can often continue training similarly to your pre-pregnancy training routine. However, for women with a history of lower back or pelvic pain, from my perspective, I'd probably advise you to avoid this exercise early on due to hormonal changes that peak around the 12-week mark. I think it's also really important to note that a woman's pelvis never completely returns to its pre-pregnancy position after birth. Instead, the ligaments and tendons that hold the pelvis together get thicker. And this, of course, may contribute to faster changes in the pelvis in subsequent pregnancies, which makes it increasingly important for those who experience pelvic pain during their first pregnancy to ensure that they do adequate rehab and really strengthen that whole area prior to any subsequent pregnancies. And I potentially not do the front foot elevated split squat if you've suffered from pelvic pain in your first pregnancy early on. But I get it, because of the anterior pelvic tilt during pregnancy, that stretch through your hip flexor and quad in the rear leg during this exercise probably feels really, really good. Of course, I encourage pregnant women to stretch that particular area, but not at the expense of creating torque on the pelvis as a whole, which is what's happening at the bottom point of this exercise when you're getting that really juicy stretch. And it's no secret, we want to be keeping your glutes as strong as possible during pregnancy, which may potentially be another reason why someone might choose this exercise. But I personally believe there are better exercises that don't place as much pressure or torque on the pelvis as the front foot elevated split squat. So of course, if I'm telling you not to train the front foot elevated split squat during pregnancy, you're probably wondering what you can do instead. Well, of course, I've got 3 great alternatives for you. And the first is the heel elevated split squat. And this is your more traditional split squat setup, which helps keep the pelvis more aligned and stable. But the front heel elevation places a wedge underneath the front foot, targeting your quads as well as your glutes. And with this variation, you don't need to drive your knee too far forward, but you want to think about letting it glide forwards while still keeping the weight through your heel. And it's really important not to let your heel come off the wedge at the front. And trust me, this innocent looking exercise is an absolute killer. Then you have the Poliquin step up. And the heel elevation again targets the quads and VMO. And you still need good ankle mobility for this exercise, similar to the front foot elevated split squat. However, you won't get the same glute activation on this exercise. So it could be placed in a superset with a single leg hip thrust, or you can try to sit your hips back further into the movement to get more glute engagement. And last but not least, the narrow stance split squat. So the narrower stance of this split squat variation forces you to drive your knee forward, meaning you get similar VMO and quad activation as the front foot elevated split squat. Ankle mobility is still key here, but to get into this position, you need to set your hips back, which brings the glutes into the equation, making it another great alternative. So while the front foot elevated split squat might seem like a great exercise during pregnancy, I personally don't program and don't recommend them because of the increased range of motion at the hip joint of this movement and the increased torque it places on the pelvis, which combined with increased pelvic instability can lead to potential strain on the SIJ and pubic symphysis. Instead, exercises like the heel elevated split squat, the Poliquin step up, and the narrow stance split squat work similar muscle groups without the increased range of motion and torque on the pelvis. So that's it from me today. I hope this video helps you make more informed decisions about training during pregnancy. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so feel free to drop me a comment below. And if you'd like more in-depth pregnancy-specific content, feel free to apply to my complimentary but private community, the Preggy Training Crew. The link is in my bio.